What is up, dudes? Welcome back. It is your boy, Random Internet Person here, back on some channel map with the new Mosquito, which came out yesterday. Spent quite a bit of time playing that with some friends and figuring out it is a quirky aircraft. Some ways it's a little bit harder than some of the other aircraft from the same era, and some ways it's a little bit easier. Before we jump into the video, though, I will say that if you're doing training in real life, keep your eyes on the channel for a minute, because I'm probably going to start doing a couple of Kisanyang Orenma. Probably going to start doing a couple of training videos aimed towards real life flying. Coming up on almost 400 hours of dual instruction given, and there's a lot of things that I've noticed that new pilots do that are very common errors, and when I went to look for videos to send students to kind of explain some of these concepts a little better, I just wasn't finding what I was looking for, so probably going to start doing some of those myself. I do have a couple of videos that I made when I was practicing for my flight instructor certificate, just to practice teaching some of the fundamentals of aerodynamics and aviation, stuff like that, but probably things a little bit geared more towards the flying aspect. And if you're doing flight training yourself and you're interested in seeing something, or if you're struggling with a concept or something that you might want to see if I to talk about, send me a message or leave a comment, and I will try to make a video for you. Gisa? Gibunyote? Anyway, we are in the Havilland Mosquito Mark 4, I think. It is a thing. I've got 4 bombs loaded. We're gonna go drop those. I'm gonna play around a little bit with the flight dynamics and show you some tips and tricks and stuff that I've figured out in the last couple days. Number one, like all of the other World War II aircrafts, it comes with, by default, it comes with takeoff assistance on. I recommend personally turning that off. It's not too bad compared to a lot of the other aircraft, particularly like the BF-109 takeoff. It is definitely more doable in that regard. So let's get this thing started up real quick. Make sure my parking brake is on, and it is. Turn on our electrical system. 24 volts over there. And we'll go ahead and get our fuel tanks on the outer. And this was not included, but I would guess that you would want to prime this, right? So I'm going to go ahead and bring the throttles full forward and turn the fuel pump on. We'll go 1, 2, 3, 4 seconds. We'll turn it off and bring the throttles back. Crack those about ½ an inch. And pretty easy to start up. So we'll go ahead and get the mags on for the left side. Flip these guys open, and we'll call the ground crew. Get them to start priming.
On the starter.
Got to make sure you have your port side window open for them to hear you do that. There's one. So one other thing about this aircraft is it has both of the engines turn in the same direction. So you have what's called a critical engine, which in this case is going to be this engine over here. Because if you're climbing, or if you're in this sort of pitch attitude, the descending propeller blade is going to have the highest angle of attack right here. So it's going to generate the most force. Now, the distance between the fuselage and that little area of the prop disc is shorter here, so it exerts less roll tendency on the airplane for that engine. Now, that engine over there, that same area where the prop is taking the biggest bite, is on the outside of the wing, which means that that distance from the fuselage to that portion of the wing is longer, so it allows it to exert more force on the airframe, so it's going to roll harder in that direction. I did lose the left engine yesterday getting shot at, and you're able to fly it, but you have to maintain, I think your VMC is like 172, so your minimum control speed is like incredibly high. So basically what I had to do was just get it back to England and then turn off the engines and land it in the field, because there's no way that you're going to be able to do a traffic pattern and stop or safely land with 170-mile approach. Alright, let's go engine number 2. There we go. 2 starts. Bring those up to 1200 RPMs here to let those guys warm up. And in terms of temperatures, I'm not really sure what to be looking for. However, part of the reason that we let the temperatures warm up in the first place is to reduce the viscosity, which reduces the oil pressure, which is going to be down here. So what I'm looking for is probably in the ballpark of about 90 pounds on both engines before we start getting this thing airborne. a couple of other quirks. In order to operate the flaps, which I'll go ahead and set up, you've got the safety latch over here on the side, so we can go up without doing anything with that safety latch. However, if we want to put the flaps down, I'm going to have to open the latch. We'll go hold it down, and then we'll go back up. So we'll go about 10 or 12 degrees, and I'll leave it there for takeoff, and we'll just verify out the window. We got about 10 degrees of flaps. We can turn on our compass here. Go ahead and switch our fuel tanks back to the inner tanks. Compass is on. This is pointing your direction. So right now we're headed about 185 degrees. So I'll sync, actually pretty close. Sync that up with our heading indicator, our directional gyro, and altimeter should be 1013 millibars. About right there. Turn coordinator is down here, just like the... If you've flown the Spitfire, a lot of this looks really familiar. Same engine, it's got two Merlins, just like the Spitfire does. So turn coordinator is exactly the same as the British aircraft. The climb rate is down here, so practically speaking, don't really use that very much because it's kind of hard to see. Something else that I've got set up, settings-wise, is when we turn on our reflector sight over here, it's going to pop us over kind of into the middle so we can use that gun sight a little bit better. I'll go ahead and turn on our radiator flaps for ground and climb operations. Trim settings for takeoff are pretty important, particularly if you're not going to use the assists. So for rudder trim, what I found works is kind of right about there, the arrow on the R, or in between the R and the I. Ailerons, again, because both of these engines are rotating clockwise from the cockpit, they're generating that left turning tendency over to the left, particularly a lot of torque roll here, so we're going to do 1 notch. Seems like a lot. We're going to go all the way to 2 notches there for takeoff. And I want some nose down, so kind of in between the first and the second notch. Trust me, seems like a lot, but it's not. Switch to radio on. And I may be missing something, but that is about it. Fuel gauge for the primary engines are over here. And I think that's about it. We will talk about the bomb fusing and stuff once we get airborne, and then these two buttons too probably also want to have bound because, like I said, you've got your critical engine, and of course if you lose one of those you're going to want the props feathered to reduce the drag as much as possible. So basically you're just going to hit that, in the case that you lose your left engine, you're going to hit this little red button and it's going to feather the propeller for you to minimize the drag from the propeller blades themselves. So let's go ahead and start taxiing over to the runway. Oil pressures are where we want them now. Taxiing ground operation is precisely as it is in the Spitfire, but for whatever reason I find it a little bit easier, so we're going to use this handbrake in conjunction with some rudders to get us turning. Also, visibility is a lot better than the other World War II aircraft tail draggers for taxiing. If you want to, you can lean forward and you can see really well where you're going. We can also put this down to kind of increase some visibility back there. I have no idea what any of this stuff does back there, radio-wise. Looking forward to a Chuck's guide. Just going to go down the other runway, hang a UE, and we'll yeet it. Landing gear also has a safety latch too, so in order to get those to come back up, we're going to hit this button. This little safety guard right here comes down towards the gear lever itself, which allows it to go back up and actually travel. So before you take off, make sure that you hit that switch. You can click it, but I've got all those bound to the HOTAS here. Something else that I'm doing, and I'll show you really quickly, I've got a T16000. Not the best, but it does have a paddle on the throttle, which I'm using for the handbrake. And I'll show you what I did with the curves to get that. Because you don't want to use just a button where it's just on or off. You want a little bit of granularity in it so you can kind of control the amount that you're using it. Let me get it lined up and I will show you. We'll let it roll forward a little bit, make sure we got it straight enough. Alright, that works. Park and brake. Real quick, adjust controls. We're going to go to axis, and here we go. wheel brake axis. So if you got a T16000 with that paddle on the throttle, this is what it looks like. Dead zone, I got a 1. Saturation for X is 100%. Saturation for Y is 100%. Curvature is 100%. I've got slider clicked and it's inverted. So if you squeeze the right side of it, it's going to actuate the handbrake. For takeoff, not going to use full power. I'm not sure what they would do precisely in real life, but what I've found is probably about 14 inches of boost down here works pretty good. And right here, the supercharger, they say to keep it in the mod position. However, doesn't really seem to do too much at low altitude, so I'm just going to go ahead and put it on auto. It hasn't been a problem for me for takeoff. And we'll let go of the brakes. Start to bring up the throttle. Here, I'm going to pull back on the yoke. Make sure we're staying straight. Once we get to about 60 miles an hour, I'm going to let go of the yoke, start to bring that forward. Now I got rudder authorities, I'm just using the pedals. Maybe 90 miles an hour. 100, and it's flying itself off the ground there. Barely had to do anything. Tap that brake. Right here, gear up. That smoke is something that I've noticed too. It would eventually go away. I don't know if that's a glitch or if I'm doing something wrong. Let's go ahead and clean up our flaps too. Also some updates to the channel map. Without looking at the changelog, I wouldn't possibly be able to tell you what they are. So we're just going to do a little low flying on our way down to where these targets are for bombing. Go ahead and bring those RPMs back a little bit too. Like I said, no idea what the smoke is about. If one of y'all knows, y'all can leave a little comment down below. None of the gauges are indicating that anything's wrong, and as far as I know, operationally, I haven't done anything ill-advised. Trimmed. There we go. Starting to take a little bit of our rudder trim out there. Alright, for bomb fusing, what we're going to have to do, click open this little cover down there. Press that little bar down, and we're going to go wings first. So now the wings are fused and ready to go. All I have to do is jump over here, slide over here to the right, and hit our bomb release. Just like most of the World War II aircraft, aiming is kind of a trick. Still not very good, and it's more of luck probably than a science, at least for me. Smoke's gone. Visibility inside is pretty awesome. there's a bunch of ground targets that are set up at Hawkinge, so we're going to fly over there and go past the port of Dover. We'll start to climb back up then and see if we can find it. Get set up for a bombing run here. Also, does not like negative maneuvers, so if you press the nose forward a little bit, those engines just start sputtering. So I try to keep positive Gs, although I tried to do a sustained negative G turn yesterday and the engines didn't quit, they just kind of choke. So I don't know if it's possible to completely kill them. Airspeed indicator is a little tricky to read, so your outer ring, you kind of got to use some context. The long portion of the airspeed needle is pointing to your actual speed. The outer ring, kind of where you would be for slower flight, the inner ring is faster. So right now I'm going about 320 miles an hour. That's booking it, boys. On Dover, so I'll start climbing north and we'll look off to somewhere to our 10 or 11 o'clock and see if we can find Hawkinge where our bombing targets are going to be. Such a cool map. Honestly, I wish the what is it, like the World War II server, they've been using Normandy, but I wish they'd use the channel map. Let's start climbing up here. Should be somewhere to our 9 o'clock now. There it is. There in that big open spot, you can see a cluster of ground vehicles parked in the middle of the runway. Also, even heavily loaded, this thing can fly and maintains like a pretty decent controllable profile at staggeringly low airspeeds. Once I get the bombs dropped, we'll do like some stalls, power off stalls, clean and with flaps, just so you can see what I'm talking about. But the speeds are like, I mean, it's in the ballpark of a light training aircraft. I guess that's what you get with a 54-foot wingspan. Double check we're set up here with the bombs. Wings are on. Oh, I want to get nose fuse on. There we go. I didn't even put I bound all these things up, and I don't even think that I put a fusing option for a tail fuse. I'm not sure when you would use that with these types of bombs. climb up a little bit, then we're just going to roll in onto them as steep as we can, at least about a 30-degree dive. They're right under the left nacelle right now. Alright, let's switch over. Remember, we're going to try to keep positive G's here. We'll leave a little bit of power in. The faster we go, the more accurate these are going to be. So 200 miles an hour, 220, 240, 260, 280. And right there. 340. Bombs away. We got a hit right in the center, but I don't think we actually hit anything. Splash damage is, a lot of you guys probably know, not the best in here. Alright, so let's get rid of the wing fusing. Turn those off. Now let's go bomb bays. And in order to use those, we're going to have to open our bomb bay door. It's that, the B lever on the left next to our gear handle. So, we are ready for these guys to climb back up here. Such a cool airplane. Even right now, we're climbing 3,000 feet per minute at 200 miles an hour. That is some power. So it's got the Merlins, which I think were like 1750 horsepower. Could be wrong on that, but that would put it at over 3,500 horsepower. And particularly when we're clean, we didn't take full fuel, and we're about to not have any bombs. This thing rips, man. Oh, by the way, when your bomb bay door is open, that little yellow light will be on to indicate that it's swung open for you. Alright, pull a little bit of power, start rolling over on these guys. Trying to maintain positive G's. Switch it over to our middle position. That was a good bomb hit, but yeah, I don't think I killed anything there. Aim a little bit shorter this time. Bombs away. Missed it again. That one was a little short, and we got our bomb bay door closed. Do a strafing run, and then we'll do some stalls. Alright. So the gun is controlled by that little guy down there. Flip the switch cover open, switch to the down position. And you've got two triggers, one for the 303s and one for the 20 millimeters. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not the best at aiming this thing because the nose is it's twitchy. I've got a bit of a curve. I think I've got a 15 curve on both pitch and roll just to dampen a little bit of that. I'm still pretty much flying with my fingertips for the most part. Let's see if I can hit anything down here. Did I hit anything? Nope. I'll give it one more pass. Legitimately need some work with the gun stuff. I wasted pretty much all my machine gun and cannon rounds trying to take out one bomber yesterday. See, if you just move it a little bit, the nose just starts walking on you. It's hard to get it trimmed precisely, and as soon as you press any forward pressure or backwards pressure on the elevator, it walks. It is a, I guess, directionally unstable aircraft, like a lot of these were at the time, but I feel like I have an easier time controlling the nose of the Spitfire. It does have a lot of armament though. 4 20mm cannons and 4 303 machine guns. It's not too shabby. Alright. Do a little nape of the earth here, and then I'll practice some of these stalls and show you what I'm talking about with the air speeds. Climb back up and do a couple stalls here. It does have a gear warning horn too, which for people like me who kind of neglect checklists in the simulator, might save your bacon a time or two. The F4 camera there is in between the left nacelle and the fuselage. Also, something else, totally random, but something else to keep in mind is if you have to eject, it's through that door, which takes a second, so I want to be earlier rather than later on that if it turns into a situation. Alright, let's go ahead and start bringing the power back. There's our gear warning horn. Alright, 140. 120, still positive control. Starting to get a little bit of a shake there at 110. 100. About 90, I'm pulling back, and 80, there's the brake. So about 80 knots without flaps. Alright, now let's try that with flaps. Flaps under 140 miles an hour. So again, we're going to unlatch our flap lever. I'll just get them all the way out here too. So now we've got about 45 degrees of flaps at 90, 80 miles an hour. No shutter yet. Get some trim in here. There you go. Slow flight at 80 miles an hour. Let's see what those flaps look like. And let me maneuver around a little bit. Get it right at 80. So you can fly the airplane at about 90 miles an hour. Nice and squishy, but that's pretty cool to me. Something this big has basically the same approach speed as like a Piper Arrow. That's freaking cool. You do have to deal with that whiny gear noise though. Alright, let's start to clean this up. And again, to go up with the flaps, you don't have to take the lever off. Go do a landing or two. Give our guys down here a flyby first. For me, what seems to feel about right is if I'm using, I'll do the first one with about 20, 25 degrees of flaps, and you can come in maybe about 120 miles an hour. Once you're over the threshold, you can just bring it back, leave a little bit of power in, and just wait for it to settle in there. That feels about right. And then with full flaps, kind of the same thing, but at about 100 miles an hour. Sup, dudes? See if I can do a landing without bouncing here. Doing on fuel a little good. So on the south side of the channel, I'll probably end up doing another video, maybe doing another one of those rail run strikes with this. On the south side of the channel, there's a ton of flak, which is how I lost my engine yesterday. Did a little rail yard strike. The strafing, the 20mm cannons do a pretty good number, particularly if you're using the air-to-ground munitions against ground targets. But I got absolutely destroyed by flak trying to egress out back here to England. Ended up ditching over the channel. Again, like I said, if you lose one of those engines, you're pretty much going to have to just cut the other one and land it somewhere. You can limp it back to friendly territory, and then you have to put it down somewhere with no engines, because it would be impossible to do an approach with a single engine in this airplane with that VMC. sounds like. Apologies for the noise. We're gonna have to bear that. I could not find in the keybinds anything for a gear silence, a gear warning horn silence. Don't know if there is one. If you know where it is, let me know. Bring our propellers back full fine. So gear at 180, flaps at 140. Come over the top and we'll join the left downwind. Again, I'll do the first one with 20 degrees, and I'll do another one with full flaps. Gumps check. Gas, again, I don't really know about the mixture. It starts in rich, which is down at the bottom right here, and you can switch it to weak, but I'm not sure when you would use those. Maybe for ground operation, perhaps. Gas undercarriage, let's go. We've got to unlatch this guy, go down. Go ahead and throw in 10 degrees of flaps. Silence. Starting to turn our downwind here. About 20. It's at 30. I'll leave it at 30. Turn and base. Again, it feels, I mean, it's obviously a little bit sluggish now because we're in essentially slow flight, but it's responsive at 120. It's probably where I'm going to keep it pretty much all the way down to the numbers. Then I'll bring it back a little bit and just let it settle in when you round out. Overall, a lot easier to fly than I thought it was going to be. I didn't know what to expect, to be honest. Again, just maintaining right now about 120. And overshoot that guy. Alright, coming over the numbers, it'll pull back a little bit, keeping the nose down. And when we start to round it out, the speed will come off, and hopefully it'll just settle in without a bounce. freaking easy. Alright, we'll do one more with full flaps to get those cleaned up. Reset rudder trim. Yeah, so that's where I came in. It's on the second notch there. I'm probably going to leave it in that ballpark there. A lot of tail heaviness. So if you don't add that nose trim, as soon as you do rotate, the nose is going to want to come up, which can cause a stall, possibly a spin, particularly if you're heavy, so don't do that. Since we're super light right now too, I'm not even going to use flaps on takeoff, and you'll probably see the same thing. It's just basically going to lift itself off in that trim situation that I've got. It's also fairly maneuverable. I was kind of tussling with a 109 yesterday. It can hold its own. Obviously, it's not as nimble as a Spitfire or something's going to be, but as a fighter bomber, I was kind of surprised by how well it performed. To roll forward a little bit just to make sure we're nice and straight before we start the roll here. There we go, double check we're trimmed. Good ailerons. We'll give a little bit more aileron. There's 60, releasing the back pressure. Now I got rudder authority. So easy compared to like the 109 and the Spitfire. Tail's coming up, a little tiny bit of back pressure, and we're flying. Tap the brakes, gear up. Oh, wrong way, wrong one. There we go. Crosswind. Gear back down. down 2 greens. Got 10 degrees of flaps. Now it shows on the flap indicator it goes up to 70. However, normal travel it stops at about 45 degrees. Not sure if there's a way that you can get all 70 degrees. Again, still waiting for that Chuck's guide. I know next to nothing about this airplane. So before we came in at 120, started pulling it back a little bit before the numbers. Just aim for about 100 this time. At 110, still no shudder or anything. The controls don't feel squishy just yet. Well, other than what you expect flying slow in a traffic pattern. Got aileron trim still over there at 20 degrees to the right, and you can see whatever, how many degrees that is. 2 yellow lines. Start to turn it in a little early so I don't overshoot this time. So we're like right above 100 miles an hour again, which again, for an airplane this big, a 54-foot wingspan, that's kind of nuts. 100 miles an hour. And it feels good. Like it's not doing anything crazy on me. Leave a little power in. Just start to bring the nose up. Just hold it right there. Tiny bit of a bounce. Get those flaps up. Do one more takeoff, just going to do it through some air maneuvers just so you can kind of see the maneuverability for, again, plane this big. Wouldn't really have expected it, but it's surprisingly nimble. And I'll come back and I'll call it a day here. Also super excited now about the F4U Corsair. Really like the direction that DCS has taken with the Warbirds, the whole World War II stuff, like damage modeling, the flight modeling. It feels really good. Sounds are also phenomenal. Go and unlatch this gear safety thing before we take off too, so don't forget that. Alright, make sure we're set up here again. Aileron, or elevator trim's good. Aileron trim, rudder trim. Hold back on the yoke. And stick. 60 should have rudder authority, and we do. Gradually increasing the power here. Tails off, add a little bit of back pressure. And it's flying. Tap the brakes. Gear. Did not put any air targets in here, but we'll still be able to kind of see how it maneuvers. Then I'll come back and I'll do a no flap landing, see how that goes. And full fine on the props. Go see what I can get boost wise here. There's 16 inches. Should I go all the way forward? Get about 18 inches. 200 miles an hour, climbing at 3,000, shooting up. 4,000 feet per minute. So I think at 30 or 3,000 RPMs and 18 inches of boost, I think they said 5 minutes before you cook something. I'm gonna get above the clouds here. Also, multi-crew is enabled. However, the guy that I was flying with yesterday was more of a nuisance than a help. Neither one of us has any idea what's going on with the radios. They can do all the bomb fusing and stuff for you, which is good, but then he just started pulling my fuel cutoff. Oh, this needs to be in the on position too. Fuel tank pressure. So I ended up just ejecting and leaving him in the airplane himself. Here's the, I guess, navigator, pilot navigator side. Tons of radios, and all this stuff is clickable. I don't know if it works, and if it does, how. A lot of stuff going on back here. Also, most of the other World War II aircraft have a cage button for the attitude indicator. So if you go wings level before you get into IMC, it'll recenter that horizon, so it's not listing as you enter it. This one, as far as I know, I can't find it. I don't know where it's at. I don't know how you cage the attitude indicator, so I'm just hoping that that's relatively correct. Hear the speeds coming down, see the nose coming up. Still climbing. Come on, baby. Oh, I can see clouds. We did it. We're live. Here we're at about 11,500. Alright, props full fine. We have boost pressure wise is 12 inches. So we get it nice and stable and trimmed. We'll kind of do some maneuvers here. Close our radiator flaps. Alright, so at almost 12,000 feet right now, pretty stable on the airspeed, cruising at 240 indicated, so it's actually still accelerating too. That's pretty fast. So pull some G's here. Let's go to the left. Really high turn rate for an airplane this big. Speed coming down, but still staying controllable. 190. Again, the speed staying right there about just under 200. Pull a little bit harder. Pull, 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 pull. See if we can get an accelerated stall. Starting to get a little bit of shake. Pull, 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 pull. Man, didn't want to stall. So that's, I mean, again, pretty good high AOA performance there, again, for a plane this big, and that's a really high turn rate. Roll rate, let's see, let's climb up a little bit. Roll rate probably suffers a little bit because the ailerons are fairly small. Actually, they're not too bad. Let's try a left roll. Not too bad. Again, you're not going to get an aileron roll quite as fast as something like a BF-109, but that's the size of this airplane is pretty crazy. Do a split S. Canopy makes these kind of things really awesome. Alright, did that whole maneuver and we lost about 1,500 feet. Again, super impressive for something this big. It's hard to wrap your mind around. Let's do a little steep spiral down to our field. Maintain a bank, keep the back pressure in, it'll keep your speed down. So when you get down there, you're already going to be nearly your landing configuration. So 180 is your gear speed. I'm holding it at about 160. Vertical speed, 4,000 plus. Make this last one a no flap approach. Like I said, probably going to aim for about 120, maybe a little higher. So right now I'm at 130, which feels pretty good. Kind of keep it here until we're on final. Don't have to turn anymore. And again, you can see this is pretty much hands-off right there. How much aileron trim, rudder trim, and elevator trim that I've got. Still on 120. Let the nose come down a little bit. Still at 100. 95. Yeah, I mean, no shutter there until we got near about 95 miles an hour. That was no flaps. So even that first one that we did with about 20, 25, probably fast. That is impressive. Go back to park and shut this bad boy down. Really cool airplane overall if you're into World War II stuff. And pretty much, like, I wouldn't say feature complete because I think some of the things are going to add now with rockets and things like that. But as it stands, even as a ground attack, the bombs are doable. It carries more than most of the other ones. You can carry 4 500-pound bombs, which is quite a bit. And it's the first airplane that has a bomb bay door, a DCS, plus with 4 20mm cannons and 4 308s. Like, that thing wrecks. Also nice change of pace to be in a World War II tail dragger that you can actually see over the nose while you're taxiing. Head back over here to park. There's our boys. Be one of those situations where having a Thrustmaster Warthog would be nice. Something that had split throttle, so you'd have 2 axes for the throttle. I've just got one, so both of the engines, the throttle levers are bound to a single axis. so I can't control those individually. So if you get into a flat spin, you're kind of screwed, which I did yesterday. It doesn't work out too well. Park and brake is on, and we can go ahead and kill these guys. There you go, guys. That is it. That's the Mosquito. Probably going to do a little bit more. We'll head over to France next time, see if we can deal with some flak and do a little railroad attack. Really cool airplane. Impressed with how well it flies. And like I said, I didn't know what to expect. Kind of expected it to be a little bit harder than things like the Spitfire and the P-47. And it's surprisingly tame. It'll bite you. Like if you pull too hard, you can literally break the tail off. But if you're flying it like you should be with most of the non-fly-by-wire airplanes in DCS, it's pretty smooth sailing, as long as you're trimming it out. A lot of power, really fast. I think 480 is kind of the top speed on there, where you're probably inside your safe structural limits. But overall, still really impressed with it. Looking forward to see what they're going to do with it. Anyway, like I said, guys, check back here in the coming days. Probably going to be making some real life training videos. And look forward to maybe another Mosquito video here in the channel in the near future. Thanks for hanging out, Kisa. Good to see you again. Everybody else, we love ya. We'll see you later. Peace.